Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Good evening, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with you on this 23rd of December. As always, we encourage you to stay up to date with your local weather information for your part of Alaska. You can do that easily with a simple phone call. 1-800-472-0391 is the Alaska Weather Information Line. Find us online at weather.gov/Alaska, and once you click there, you'll get your local forecast very quickly. You can always listen to the NOAA Weather Radio on the NOAA Weather Radio or on Marine Band, VHF, or simply send me an email if you can't find what you're looking for. I'm happy to help. David.Snider@noaa.gov is how you find me. Let's take a look at what's going on around your part of Alaska tonight across the upper Tanana Valley and the upper Yukon. We're talking about winter weather advisories there, generally blowing snow, wind advisories for the yellow shaded region here. Generally talking about winds from the south and southeast gusting to as much as 50 to 55 miles per hour or so. This is probably going to not have a huge effect on any snow that's on the ground because either there's not a whole lot there or it's not blowing around right now. So mainly it's just a wind issue. We're not really concerned about the visibility side of that right now. So wind through the region will probably continue at least through tonight and into tomorrow afternoon about 3 o'clock. The wind advisories for the upper Tanana and the upper parts of the Yukon Valley with gusts there to about 40 to 50 miles per hour. Winter storm warnings continue out around the Bering Strait, St. Lawrence Island included there. It's still looking at about 1 to 3 inches of snow and maybe a little bit of ice. That ice, of course, is bad news for power lines, but something to consider. Winds there will continue to blow, but the main issue will be the 1 to 3 inches of snow on top of that with some ice. That'll last through tonight and into about 6 o'clock tomorrow morning. Let's go a little bit further out in toward the Alaska Peninsula. And we have winter weather advisory for snow and blowing snow in this case for about 2 to 6 inches of accumulation here. This will last through tonight and into tomorrow morning, about 6 o'clock or so. This is after Cold Bay picked up, I believe it was 12.9 inches there, which was, I believe, the 5th highest one-day snowfall total on record there for Cold Bay. So pretty impressive stuff yesterday, a decent amount of snow falling in the region. So hopefully that it was a shovelable event for you and get a little much needed rest today after that if you can. Here's a look at the satellite picture now, and you'll notice after the last couple days we've had this really large plume of moisture stretching all the way out into the Gulf. That's being interrupted now as the front has been gradually creeping its way northward. That strong southeasterly flow has started to change a little bit, and because of that, the amount of moisture being pushed into western Alaska and the Alaska Peninsula has been changing. Still hasn't quite made it to southeast. Relatively calm weather there by comparison, and a nice break for you. Cold, but just not terribly rough right now. But as that front moved over Cold Bay yesterday, no doubt about it, it certainly yielded a lot of snow for you. And now as we look out to the west, we can tell that some colder air is moving in from the west. But this boundary is still here. It hasn't really gone away, so we're going to have to wait for this to shift just a little bit more and the weather pattern to change before we are all under this quieter weather pattern. So not just yet. 984 millibar low there, still south of the Alaska Peninsula. We have kind of an offshore breeze for southeast and really most of the Copper River Basin. Here's the front, and this is moving its way north and west. And waves of weather still passing from south to north across Alaska. The overall trend for the west coast is a warmer one, even as snow is falling across the Yukon Delta. You can see the snow and blowing snow continues for the Yukon Delta, but trends are moving toward improvement for that region. The western end of the Seward Peninsula and St. Lawrence Island still under wintry weather tonight with that winter storm warning for you. And periods of snow showers and light snow still possible around the Alaska Peninsula and the chain. Again, the winter weather advisory for the Alaska Peninsula for areas of snow and blowing snow, up to 6 inches in some places there, again through tonight and early tomorrow. Low pressure will creep its way into Bristol Bay at 1,003 millibars. It's not a terribly strong system, but it is one of the circulations that could create more precipitation across the west coast into Norton Sound and into the Seward Peninsula. You'll notice this boundary really doesn't change very much through Sunday and Monday. Across southeast, we expect to see areas of cloud cover kind of sneaking in on your location, but it doesn't really look like you're going to get a huge handful of clouds with that offshore breeze just keeping things nice and quiet for you. Watch for several areas of low pressure out across the central and eastern chain that could produce a little bit of snow from time to time as we get into Monday, Christmas Day. Low pressure is still hovering across the north and eastern Gulf. It will be the focus for precipitation in that region, and for places like Juneau, you might sneak out with a little bit of new snow. Around Prince William Sound, some snow showers are possible there down toward Kodiak Island. Chances are you'll see a rain and snow mix in the region. Snow showers across the YK Delta into the Seward Peninsula, Nome, Kotzebue, Shishmaref, up toward the Arctic Circle and points northward out across the central chain. Another area of low pressure there sneaks into the mix at 1,014 millibars. Nothing great there, but that could be some rain and snow in that region. Maybe a little bit of stronger wind for Adak out toward Kiska there, but nothing too substantial. So let's look at the weather as we go through the rest of your holiday weekend. Let's take a look at temperatures as we get into Sunday morning. Mid to upper 20s for most in southeast, near 32 in Sitka, Ketchikan, and Annette in the upper 20s. Around Prince William Sound, we're talking about temps in the teens. South Central, you could see temperatures as cool as the teens and 20s. Places like Gulkana are going to be pretty cold there. Same goes for Eagle and Northway, anywhere from sub-zero at 9 below to 20 to 30 below, thanks to that big high-pressure system sitting out here, trying to finally make it winter-like around here, right? Around Fairbanks, anywhere from 5 to 15 below, 20 below in Fort Yukon. You're looking at 5 above to 5 below for the North Slope. Kotzebue Sound, teens and 20s, and about 20 for Unalakleet. Bethel, you're looking at temperatures in the mid-20s, Kodiak in the upper 30s. Southwest and the Alaska Peninsula hovering close to freezing and just below it for most of the chain. High temperatures there on Sunday back in the mid-30s. Many across the west coast will hover just about freezing there once you get north of Dillingham to Bethel. 30 in Nome, 11 in Barrow, 3 below in Fort Yukon, 12 in Fairbanks, South Central, Talkeetna, southward in the upper 20s, Prince William Sound in the 30s, highs in southeast in the 30s with coastal areas, outer coast that is, closer to 40 degrees. Overnight lows Monday morning. Looks like Northway winds at 28 below, 18 below around Gulkana, 11 below in Fort Yukon, 5 below in Fairbanks, 22 for Nome. It looks like 5 in Barrow. Kotzebue, you're talking about temps in the upper teens, 21 in Nunivak Island, 28 in St. Paul. Dutch Harbor and Unalaska, 32, and 20s and 30s for most in South Central, Southeast. Overnight lows in the 20s and 30s there. Look for high temperatures on Christmas Day. Back in the mid to upper 30s for many. South Central, mid to upper 20s, 35 in Kodiak, 9 in Fairbanks, 12 in Barrow, 24 in Kotzebue, 27 in Nome. Gamble looking at 27 degrees. Bethel in the mid-20s, and Unalaska and Dutch Harbor about 37 on Christmas Day.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
On your flying weather now, IFR conditions will last around the YK Delta, Nunivak Island up through the Bering Strait for your Sunday morning. Look for IFR across the east-facing slopes of the Kenai Fjords region, as well as the Kenai Peninsula, and into the western Alaska range, right up to about Lake Iliamna, where you have MVFR to start, and MVFR to IFR conditions across a large part of Kodiak Island, north and south. Southeast, still in the clear. Things looking pretty good there. Watch for some patchy fog in the Copper River Valley as you go through Sunday. That's what the blob is there. IFR conditions last in the same places in South Central throughout the day, up toward the YK Delta, and kind of thinning out around the Bering Strait. You'll notice a drying trend here for many locations. Not really any changes there for Southeast, and most of the interior and the northern passes look pretty good. MVFR patchy across the western chain and the western Bering. By Monday morning, Christmas Day, you'll notice IFR conditions across the Kuskokwim Valley and mainly in the south and western areas north of Lake Iliamna and the western Alaska Range passes, around Nome, and hit and miss across the YK Delta. Otherwise, widespread MVFR from the Bering Strait, St. Lawrence Island, all the way into the northern Gulf. Southeast still looking pretty clear. That begins to change a little bit by Monday afternoon. We may see some patchy MVFR around Chilkoot and White Pass and into some of your Copper River Basin areas, Tenuta Pass, maybe not toward Mentasta Pass just yet. Out across the west, Kotzebue Sound, Norton Sound, and patchy areas just west of the Pribilofs, expecting MVFR for your Monday afternoon. Here's your pass conditions for your Christmas Eve day. Anaktuvik and Anigan Pass expected to see VFR conditions there as we go through your Sunday. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass should be IFR through most of the day, so plan accordingly for that. Rainy pass expected to start at VFR with a slow lean toward MVFR conditions as we go through your Christmas Eve day. Windy pass, VFR conditions expected. Same goes for Isabel Pass and Mentasta Pass, all looking pretty good. Same goes for Tenita Pass, actually. Now, there will be some areas of patchy fog, probably in the Copper River Valley. Hard to say if that's going to be thick enough to affect some of the passes there, but do plan on that as you're coming and going from the valley there. Portage Pass looking for MVFR to IFR conditions throughout the day, and Choke and White Pass, like we saw, just looking pretty good for the next couple days. Freezing levels indicate some warm air is still hovering across the eastern Gulf, anywhere from 2 to about 4,000 feet. Some of that, those higher levels right over the Panhandle, in fact, just south of Yakutat. And there's a bubble of warm air up across the northern interior between about 4,000 and 6,000 feet from about Fort Yukon almost all the way down to Fairbanks. A healthy inversion there this morning of about, I think it was about 40 to 50 degrees. And then a 6,000 foot freezing level across Fort Yukon all the way up toward Kaktovik and Barrow, as well as Prudhoe Bay and Dead Horse. That is a sizable amount of warm air. The surface freezing line hovering right over the Pribilofs, Kodiak Island, down toward Chignik and maybe Prince William Sound or so. Here's a look at the icing potential. Then for Sunday, you're looking at levels at or above 4,000 feet to about 5,000 feet, a little bit further toward the interior, and then 8,000 feet over the Gulf. There's still some patchy areas of rich moisture out there, so with that and the temperatures involved, we're going to say considerable moderate for some areas around Cook Inlet, Bristol Bay, all the way up toward Amonic and northward and into the Bering Strait. But you'll notice that plume of moisture, though, is kind of getting smaller. That's a trend to pay attention to. That is a changing weather pattern indeed. Here is the jet stream right now. Now, the overall weather pattern, it still looks as messy as it has been for weeks now. The Pacific jet just flying across the North Pacific 120 to 130 knots. And here is our upside down U-shaped pattern here, this kind of omega block. A strong southerly flow across the Bering and a strong northerly flow descending off the pole. This surge of southerly winds, believe it or not, is going to cross the pole, at which point it becomes a northerly flow into places of Eastern Europe. So they'll probably get a taste of the cold that could have been from us anyway, but this is a pretty strong southerly surge going up toward the pole and then descending over here as well. So the cold and snow comes for the lower 48. At 9,000 feet, high pressure is anchored up around Kaktovik, a south and easterly flow setting up across the interior with wind speeds between 20 and about 45 knots in the north, slower down south, south-central, 20 to 35 knots, light winds across southeast, and a general westerly flow across the Bering Sea. At 3,000 feet, you can see several waves of low pressure, one of those near Haida Gwaii, one near Kodiak Island, southwest and Cape Newenham, and up near the Gulf of Anadyr in the central chain. Stronger winds there ahead of the Aleutian low. Otherwise, south and easterlies moving across Alaska at about 10 to 40 knots here at 3,000 feet. So we're watching for turbulence. Now, I think in the morning there may be still some rough wind here across the western Brooks Range, as well as areas in the lee side of the Alaska Range up toward the middle Yukon Valley, below 8,000 feet. But after that, things really start to improve. The wind starts to slow down. Otherwise, considerable moderate. Should be fairly widespread through at least midday across the west, south central, and southwestern Alaska, and setting up in southeastern Alaska. Your Marines in just a few minutes.
When you think of a national park, you probably envision wide open natural spaces, undisturbed by human activity. There are indeed such places, but even in some of the most remote areas of a place like Kenai Fjords National Park in Alaska, the mark of man is present. Marine debris is a menace to the farthest reaches of our globe, and even designated national park lands are not immune. In the summer of 2009, the Resurrection Bay Conservation Alliance, a grassroots conservation organization based in Seward, Alaska, decided to do something about the marine debris fouling the beaches of Kenai Fjords National Park. Marine Debris Coordinator Tim Johnson had first-hand experience with the issue.
The summer before, my wife and I, Michelle, had done a paddle from Seward, sea kayak paddle from Seward to Homer. Really, our eyes were open to some areas that we didn't realize there was so much accumulation. It was very deceiving up front. You couldn't really get a feel for the extent and impact of it. You've got this nice high tide line that's quite pristine, and you really don't get a picture for the impact, the amount of debris in that area until you get behind those storm berms. You get back into the lagoons and the vegetation around those lagoons. And then you see the absolute extent back into that veg and how intertwined and enmeshed these decades of trash deposition. So we were just appalled by that and said we got to get something together on a larger scale.
The Resurrection Bay Conservation Alliance is a local nonprofit community organization, and they have been instrumental in helping the Park Service obtain funding to get larger boats to help move the debris, and they get volunteer labor and organize the work trips. And so it's really a partnership between the Park Service and the community to help get out and really get a project done that in and of itself any one group couldn't do on their own.
Most of that trash was baggable. However, there were large items, huge, piles of hauser line, for example, that we just had to hoist up onto the boat.
The volunteers didn't just bag, haul, and hoist the garbage, but also carefully recorded what types of debris were collected.
In many ways, the debris itself is a resource. Archaeologists use middens, the trash heaps, as a way of analyzing past cultures. And in one sense, marine debris is a form of a midden. It's a trash heap that left for the future would be something that people could use to analyze our culture. It may not say the best things about our culture or everything that we want, but we need to be able to document what we've done so that we can preserve that legacy, make sure that we as a society don't forget what we've been doing.
We had two larger categories of marine debris that we picked up. Commercial fishing means like, say, gill nets, large hauser lines, anything that would be associated with more of a commercial fishing scale. And then the second category was more recreational fishing and household, which would be general plastics, things like that. So we had about a 75% of the commercial fishing marine debris element, and about 25% of the recreational and household further out the bay. And we had the exact opposite the closer we got to Seward. Within the bay, it was about 25% commercial fishing versus 75% recreational fishing and household.
The trash is not just unsightly for park visitors, but also poses threats to wildlife and marine habitat.
Really one of the larger issues now that you go to this plastic that can really get into the food web and affect the food web differently than something like glass.
These substances, for instance, all these polystyrene blocks that are breaking down into all these little crumbly bits are further breaking down on a microscopic level, and how much of an impact that has, in this ecosystem is yet to be determined, but I think it's got pretty high potential.
Well known that sea turtles will eat plastic bags floating in the water. They look like jellyfish to a sea turtle, and obviously a plastic bag doesn't go well in the digestive system of a turtle. Albatross will see small pieces of plastic floating on the surface and think they're small fish and other food sources and eat that in their stomachs, especially in some of the northwestern Hawaiian Islands, they'll find dead albatross that have starved to death with a full stomach, and it's full of pieces of plastic.
We're affecting our local areas this way, but we need to be thinking about it from more of a state and a global, international scale. And most importantly, to try and focus on prevention of it coming in the first place. Because we're just going to see this continuing, to build up on our beaches unless we're able to get a little bit more of an approach on prevention on the front end.
Marine debris is really a global problem, in all the oceans, and there are many different sources. Global shipping is one. Fishing debris from commercial fishing, recreational boating activity on land, stuff blowing off land, washing down streams, people just throwing stuff on the shore.
Though the problem can seem overwhelming, Johnson remains upbeat about making a positive difference.
No, you gotta start locally. You gotta take control of what you can do, and make something with that, and try and move on from there.
Overall, more than 9 tons of debris was removed from the beaches of Kenai Fjords National Park and transported back to Seward to be deposited in a landfill.
People gave a lot to the project in order to make it happen. That was awesome. One of the most amazing experiences I've ever had. Being able to put that large of a group of volunteers together, dedicated volunteers to put that much effort and give that much time and pull all the different agencies together to see it all happen was incredible. It was incredible. Yeah, very fulfilling experience.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Here's a look at the sea ice edge for this December 23rd, and once again you'll notice the open water through the Bering Strait and into the Chukchi Sea. There are many areas with very little marginal ice across parts of Kotzebue Sound and into Norton Sound. A lot of that strong southerly wind has pushed away some of the thicker ice across the north-facing coastlines and pushed that up toward the south-facing coastlines. This trend will continue through tonight and into tomorrow at least, and probably into the early part of next week. However, as we said yesterday, the sea surface temperatures are right there, and once the wind settles down in this region, that ice will probably come back very quickly. It will be new ice and thin ice, but it will come back. So watch for some changes, not only from today to tomorrow with moving ice, but then perhaps a return to more ice as we go into later next week as winds settle down. Let's take a look at a place where the winds are generally calmer than they've been in a while across many parts of southeast, especially the inside passages. Only 15 to 20 knot winds. Stevens Passage has had some stronger gusts from time to time, but overall 15 to 20 knots will be had with 3 to 4 foot seas on the inside. An offshore flow continues, 25 to 35 knots in the region with 14 to 18 foot seas on Sunday. For Monday, a return to onshore winds. Look for the west and northwesterly winds to set up 20 knots with 12 to 13 foot seas, and that means the clouds are going to start creeping in a little bit more, and gradually watch for them to start swinging back into the region as we go into Monday and maybe bring a chance of snow. Light winds on the inside, though, 10 knots and 2 foot seas for your Monday, Christmas Day. Across south central, look for easterlies inside of Prince William Sound, 25 knots, 6 foot seas, a healthy southeasterly flow widespread across the northern Gulf. 16 to 17 foot seas there, 25 to 30 knot winds, and north and easterly winds coming down Cook Inlet. Slightly higher seas there south of Calgon Island and outside of Resurrection or Kashamak Bay. About 25 knots with 9 foot seas in general. For Monday, light winds on the inside, easterlies inside of Prince William Sound, 3 foot seas on a 15 knot wind to south and westerly wind across the northern Gulf, 15 to 20. And Cook Inlet looking at 15 to 20 knots, 3 to 5 foot seas there on Monday. For Bristol Bay, look for a northwesterly flow, 25 knots and 9 foot seas. Higher seas there as you move down the Alaska Peninsula up to 15 foot seas as you move southward across the western Gulf there and into Shelikof Strait. Looking at 5 foot seas in the strait with easterlies at 25. Otherwise, a west and southwesterly flow at 30 to 35 knots and 16 to 18 foot seas and higher seas south of Kodiak Island. As we get into Monday, things start to settle out. Westerlies crossing the southern Alaska Peninsula, 10 to 15. 5 to 8 foot seas there, looking for 6 foot seas inside of Bristol Bay, 4 foot seas inside of Shelikof Strait, and 7 to 11 foot seas as you move out into the Pacific, 20 to 25 knots in some of the northern areas. For the Aleutians, westerlies in general, about 20 to 25 knots, a few places slightly higher, Adak and Atka, one of them, 30 knots with a 14 foot sea, 9 to 11 foot seas on the Pacific coast, generally 9 to 13 foot seas across the Bering Sea coast, with a slight rise in those seas, about 15 to 20 foot north of Atka and Nikolsky. As we get into Monday, improvements all around. Low pressure systems working through. You can see the circulation here. Southeasterlies around Nikolsky toward Unalaska, 20 to 30 knots, and more of a 35 knot wind crossing through Atka and Adak. Northerlies from Adak to Kiska up to 40 knots with a 16 foot sea, and then a quick drop off as you move westward toward Kiska and Shemya. Along the west coast, southeasterlies south of St. Lawrence Island, 25 knots, 11 foot seas there. Northerlies as you head into St. Paul and St. George. Light wind, though, 10 knots and 6 foot seas. Northwesterlies outside the Kuskokwim Delta, 11 foot seas expected on Sunday. By Monday, you can see winds slowing down a little bit more from the Kuskokwim out toward the Pribilofs, 5 to 7 foot seas there. And a west and southwesterly flow developing, heading toward St. Lawrence Island, 9 foot seas and 20 knot winds. Southerlies over the ice in Norton Sound, only at 10 knots. Across the Beaufort Sea, easterlies 15 to 20 in general. Looks like that's still over the ice for southeasterlies. Across the Chukchi Sea, you're looking at 15 to 25, 5 to 6 foot seas south of Point Hope and Cape Lisburne, and southeasterlies once again south of the Strait, 25 knots with 11 foot seas. That's a little bit more of a southwesterly flow on Monday. Southeasterlies begin to diminish across the Chukchi Sea, and again, we'll wait for a little more ice to form southeasterlies over the Beaufort, anywhere from 10 to 25. Recapping tonight's weather, wind advisories posted for the eastern Alaska Range and the upper Tanana Valley and the upper Yukon Valley for gusts that could reach upwards of about 30 to 40 miles per hour. Some areas will be a little bit stronger, up to 50 miles per hour, probably around the Richardson Highway and some of the passes, so watch out for that. For St. Lawrence Island, you're still under a winter storm warning. 1 to 3 inches of snow and perhaps some ice on top of that. Snow and blowing snow will continue through Sunday morning, and for Christmas Day, areas of light snow in southeast, southwest, and the northwestern parts of Alaska. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider. Thanks for joining us for Alaska Weather tonight.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.